Welcome to the Employee to Boss podcast, a podcast for everyone with an entrepreneurial spirit. Every week, I am joined by successful guests in all different industries and stages of business who will share what their experience was like transitioning from employee to boss. This is a resource for you if you're wanting to start a business, go all in on your side hustle, get to the next level, or just hear what it's like taking the leap to becoming your own boss. I'm your host, Haley Hayhurst, the owner of Espresso Podcast Production, a full-service podcast production agency specializing in editing, marketing, and strategy. Let's dive into today's topic. Hey, Stephanie, welcome to the Employee to Boss podcast.
Hello.
It's so nice to have you. So you're an international speaker, private advisor, and author of Confident Introvert. You've spoken at more than 250 events, including Harvard, Boston University, and LinkedIn headquarters. And your work has been featured in Forbes, Business Insider, and Entrepreneur, which is incredible. I can't wait to hear more about that. And you work privately with thought leaders to elevate their visibility, speaking, and influence, which is what we're here to talk about today. So welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Haley.
Why don't you start off by telling us more about your journey from employee to boss?
Yes. Okay. So thank you for reading the bio, but there's a story there. It's not like these accolades came out of nowhere. So essentially, I started out in 9-to-5s, really trying to fit myself in to what it would look like to be successful as I saw it. I grew up seeing my aunt working in downtown San Francisco in the financial district. And there was a certain type of success that I thought, oh, that'd be cool to emulate. So I ended up getting a tech job. That was the main goal, moved to San Francisco. And then within a few months of making the big move, was laid off. And then, there was just a lot that all happened at once. And there came a time to decide, okay, what do I do now? Do I move out of this city? Do I try to get another job? Like, what do I do? So I made the decision, no, I want to stay in this city. And I want to see what it would be like to do work that feels meaningful and fun, because the job that I had previously wasn't really fun and didn't feel that meaningful. So I ended up getting into qualitative market research. So it started out being that person with the clipboard, recruiting random people on the street to participate in a survey, and then taking relevant people up with me. The know, like, and trust factor had to happen really fast to be able to have people in real time participate in these qualitative research studies. And then that evolved pretty quickly into traveling all over the US to both recruit people, but also to be involved to the end-to-end of studies, right? So I'm creating the questions and moderating the panels and then reporting the findings, top line analysis. So from there, being really immersed in that world, there came a point where I started being invited to speak. And the topic was networking for introverts. And that became a platform that I was heavily focused on for 7 years, all about human connection through the lens of introversion, because those of us that are introverted need to manage our energy a little bit differently to show up fully. And the question soon became less about, oh, how do you connect with people? And more about, how can I establish thought leadership? Or how can I get on stages? How can I feel great about the experience of being on a stage, and also, let's say, write a book or really establish myself as a thought leader? So now I work as a private advisor for thoughtful leaders, focusing on just that visibility, publishing books, and also creating and touring your keynote talk.
Okay, amazing. What kind of leaders are you working with? Like, what are they doing?
So when I say thoughtful leader, it's not necessarily always introverts. My client base is about 50-50 introvert, extrovert, and most people, I would say, are in between, right? Ambiverts is the term, which means that some situations drain you, other situations enliven you, that have to do with socializing and people.
I've never heard that. Maybe I'm that.
Oh, totally. I think most people are. So I myself am slightly more introverted, but I'm not like 100% introverted. Certainly there are some situations that do kind of light me up, for example. And it's not like everything is depleting and then I need to go in a cave and then like, now I'm okay. And most of us have that. It's not as simplistic. It's not black and white.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's so
and then to get
interesting.
into more depth about the people that I work with. So so thoughtful people could be anybody, any profession, but the people that gravitate towards me the most are people, tech executives, finance executives, as well as founders and people that are either in healthcare or healthcare adjacent.
Mm, okay. Okay. It makes sense to me because I feel like in that sort of industry, it's really important to speak up and be heard and have your thoughts listened to, right? I feel like, especially for women, we can be really disregarded in a lot of
Mhm.
situations when we're more quiet. And honestly, I used to be really introverted, and that was one of the reasons why I can now talk to a wall, is because I was like, if I want to have success or if I want to have whatever, I know I have to talk to people. I know I have to like do this. Like it wasn't an option.
Mhm.
Is that what you see with your clients as well?
In terms of speaking into the void, I
Yeah.
don't think that really comes naturally to anyone. You know,
Yeah.
if you're recording a podcast episode or getting comfortable on video, I mean, I find what can help is having a back and forth. So, some of the most powerful clips that you can have of yourself speaking would be in, for example, like a podcast format like this. There's probably going to be more energy and you have something to bounce off of. Although it is a useful skill to be able to speak without having any of that sort of feedback, especially if, let's say, you're giving a virtual presentation, a virtual keynote. It may be presenter view only, and you could get some engagement in the chat with people like, give me a one if you agree with this, and then you're getting a bunch of ones, and that's cool. But there's nothing like being able to look people in the eye. So it is a skill to hone, and I think that's awesome that you made
Yeah.
the choice that, hey, kind of stare at this wall and talk and record it and let's go.
Exactly, exactly. No, that's super interesting. To that point, what I am so curious to hear your perspective on is podcasting. That's the world that I'm in. And a lot of people don't want to host their own, but they want to be a guest on them, which I think is a great approach. But I was talking to someone, I want to say 2 weeks ago, who had been on a guest on like 200 podcasts and maybe got three inquiries from it.
Mm. Yeah.
And I'm curious, with the intention part of what you help your clients with, what advice do you have there? Like the intention of what they're saying.
When it comes to podcasting, so I myself have had a podcast. I had one for 2 years,
Mhm.
and there's a difference in the sense that when you have your own podcast, you get to leverage it to speak with people that you may not normally be able to speak with, where it puts you in a power position where you're not necessarily like submitting and like, "Oh, I hope I am selected," or
Mhm.
it can also happen more naturally where you're having conversations with people like with us. We had a connection call and it was like, "Oh, this
Yeah.
seems like a natural fit." We move forward. But when you have your own podcast, you get to control the narrative and you're establishing even more calm authority. And it doesn't mean you have to be calm, but that's a phrase that I use because oftentimes introverts in particular are sometimes confused around, wait, I want to be this force, I want to be a public speaker, but I don't have a background in theater, or I'm not this person that has enthusiasm that's gonna like blow the lid off, where
Yeah.
it gets to be a little more understated. And calm authority is essentially embodying what you stand for, knowing what that is, and coming from that place, and then people get to come to you to be on your show through a podcast lens.
Yeah, totally. What advice would you give to someone who's a guest on shows?
If you are a guest on a show, it is a nice gesture to watch a clip at least, to get a lay of the land, to understand the content of the show. So, for example, beyond what the title is, it's good to have an understanding of, okay, what sort of hat do I want to have? Is this personal development? Is it professional development? I don't think
Mhm.
it's always necessary. If you're newer to podcasting, then yeah, do a deep dive if you feel like it. But ultimately, it's a conversation with you and the host,
Yeah.
and it's an opportunity to further that rapport, and then other people get to listen. And what I
Mhm.
found, being on both ends of the spectrum, is you get to strengthen that tie and that relationship, and you get to share insights and resources. And then whoever's attracted to the community that the podcast host has cultivated, then they get to sort of peek into your world and your expertise that way.
Exactly, exactly. Now, thinking about the confidence standpoint, where does that come in to showing up online?
I'm going to share my 4-part Connect with Confidence framework. So, this is
Okay.
what all of my private clients go through with me. And I'd like you to envision a pyramid image, and the very base layer, the fundamental, is calm.
Mm,
Because how many of us have experienced seeing a speaker that they're kind of like, hi, and there's like a manic energy, and
mhm,
that, oh, maybe they're trying to transmute their nerves into excitement. And sometimes it doesn't always land, but there's something about having a baseline calm. It doesn't mean that you're flatlined and you become monotone. It just means that you're not operating from that place that's activated, where you're less likely to be able to think clearly and where you could actually flub what you're trying to say because you're not feeling centered. So, when I work with clients privately, we focus on establishing a baseline calm, and then we build confidence on top of that. Because how powerful is it to be able to have this sense of underlying calm, and then you identify and amplify the strengths that you have. And then this brings us to the third pillar of 4, is connection. Then you're able to connect with people from that place that's rooted, grounded. There's no graspy, reachy energy. You are rooted in yourself. You know who you are. And people are attracted to that. When you don't need something from them, you know your value. And then the last step is impact, because we are able to go further together. So when we have that deeply rooted sense of calm, when we feel confident, we're actively growing and cultivating and living in our zone of genius. And then we're connecting with people, and people are meeting us at our highest level. And then we're able to actually partner with higher caliber
mm,
partnerships, and we're able to reach not just more people, but the right people that can
totally.
help us grow our business and ultimately grow our life purpose, why we're here with our impact.
Yeah, yeah. Is your approach different when you're working with someone who's introverted versus extroverted?
The framework stays the same. And as I mentioned earlier, my clients are pretty much 50-50 introverted,
Yeah.
extroverted. I have found that my extroverted clients are more likely to be interested in the tactical, like, hey, give me the steps that I need to take
Mm,
to make this happen, and to be really high level. And, they want to be like, hey, I want to execute this. And then with my more introverted clients, I'm able to meet them in a way that most people have not. So that's the feedback that I consistently get, where there gets to be an even greater depth when it comes to understanding how to translate your expertise, because many of these professions that I mentioned, right? There's people that are in healthcare or that have PhDs that have been studying for years and publishing articles, and people who have been crunching numbers in the financial world or behind the scenes in the tech world that maybe built something valuable. Now it's time to translate that.
yeah.
And it's not necessarily translating it into like being boastful or showy, but being able to matter of factly talk about some of the wins, and to be able to tie that in to stories that people will actually remember that help you connect.
Yeah. And I was looking at your website. You have a create your signature workshop day with you. So, when it comes to that, thinking of I think what happens with a lot of people who get on stage or on podcasts or whatever is they're like, "What am I gonna talk about, and how am I gonna, like, talk about this?" I even host a podcast, and sometimes people ask me to speak, and I'm like, "What am I gonna speak on?" Like,
Mm.
sure, I can talk about podcasting, but, like, what different angles am I gonna take that people are actually gonna care? It's not gonna be like, "How to post your podcast." It has to be something more. So, when you're working with your clients, helping them figure out their signature talk, what's maybe, your advice there?
One of the things that I look for is, do you have any existing ideas, or do you have any existing talks? And people that I work with fall into a few different categories. There's the person that has a talk that they've been giving, but it's actually not aligned with something that's embodied, especially, let's
Mhm.
say, in personal growth. Sometimes people lead with their deepest wound that is actually not yet healed. So I'm able to discern pretty quickly how embodied a message is, because a part of calm authority is being able to speak in a clear, steady tone and maintaining eye contact and maintaining that sense of conviction. And if there's a part of you that really doesn't believe what you're saying yet, it's going to contradict the entire message of what you're trying to get across. So that's typically what I'm looking for if someone has a talk they've been giving, maybe for a long time, that really has not resulted in any or very few invitations to speak again or clients. So then there are other people who have a laundry list of different talks, and every place they give a talk, it's always different and catered to them. And I mean, that's a form of people pleasing, really. And
Mm.
it dilutes your authority, because when you have one talk that you lead with, it doesn't mean that that's all that you'll ever give. But if you have a very strong, well put together talk, that then you're more easily referred, and you have an opportunity to, of course, expand later on, or have other talks that then, let's say you give a great talk once and then maybe the conference invites you back, then you're able to pull from your other talks because you've already established that credibility. And then, of course, there's a person that is like, I don't know. And sometimes that is an illusion where it's like, okay, you do know deep down, but sometimes there can be a hesitation to claim it. So in a VIP intensive, those are typically the three types of speakers that I'm working with. However, I also work at a higher level in longer term containers, so that, and sometimes the VIP day can be a lead in to the longer term work, because then there comes the question of, okay, so you've reached out to XYZ conferences and now you're getting follow-up questions, you're being asked about your rate, how to conduct those conversations.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. So you have different ways that you work with people. Where did the book come in? How did that come to life?
Yeah, it's right there. So for those of you
I love it.
watching,
It's such
yeah,
a cute, like, cover. I love it.
thank you. And so, I didn't actually optimize for cute. I'm glad you think it's cute. Some people think it's ugly. And I decided, I've literally had people low key tell me that. And it's like, I chose it to be something that you remember. It's
Mhm.
not something, because, I could have made it more delicate, but, I love that you can open it up. And when you see the front and the back cover, it's like the silhouette's hair flows from one side to the next of the book. And, it's something that helps it stand out. And when it came to the book itself being written, it was a product of the workshop. So I had given the workshop so many times and had so many Q&As following the workshop that I knew, okay, I can't add more to this 1 hour workshop. There's only so much time and information that I'm able to put in here, but I can put this into a book. And it was something that I knew was needed. The talk was already validated in the San Francisco market and beyond. So then, yeah, I drafted the book in 2019, right before I went to a Vipassana retreat. So that really lit a fire under me where, okay, the Vipassana retreat is in 6 weeks. I need to finish this draft, because guess what? When you're in a Vipassana meditation retreat, you're not allowed to write. You can't, like, you're not allowed to listen to music. It's very much so a reset. So I knew myself. And if I had creative ideas, which I did actually during the retreat, and I couldn't write them down, I thought that would just be insanity. So I
Mhm.
just wrote as much as I could, for 1 to 4 hours a day, every day
Wow.
for six
Wow.
weeks. And then I had the first draft. And then any author will tell you, you are far from done when you have the first draft. But, it's a labor of love, it's a worthwhile process. So I ended up working with a book coach and
Cool.
getting the nuts and bolts together. It was very important to me that it looked extremely professional, no typos. Um, and yeah, then it ended up coming out in it was going to be 3 months later, but then sometimes in publishing there are delays, so it ended up coming out 6 months later.
Okay. Okay. Did you self-publish or did you have a publisher?
I did, yeah. And actually, that's one of the things that I work with people now when they're elevating their thought leadership, because I know the process. I've
Yeah.
published two books that people rarely look at and think are self-published.
Amazing. That's a great compliment for sure.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks.
I love that. No, I think it's really cool that you point out, right, that your signature talk and like what you're good at and what you can speak of all the time has created all these different opportunities. I think for anyone who is thinking like, do I need to say what do I even talk about? All of these things. Can you kind of lay out when that became solidified, what came from it?
So, how I knew that I wanted to go down the speaker path was I was invited to give a talk. And sometimes most of the people I work with are not invited to give a talk right away. They just know that they want to. So they
Mm,
create their own path. We take steps to create their own stage and all of that. But I happen to be invited, as some people are, right? And then there's a choice to make. Do you want to take that opportunity or say, no, not now, or oh, no, not ever? And
mhm,
it was something that felt exciting. And, I was invited to give a talk when I didn't even have a talk. There was nothing outlined or drafted or
mm,
anything. And I took it as a challenge. And I just asked myself, what am I an expert in right now? And then working with a coach, I was able to get more clear on things that were so second nature that I was able to infuse them into a talk and realize that I had lived experience to be able to teach these things where it's not always about, oh, I have this credential or I studied this under this instructor for X amount of years. And then I have this piece of paper that says that I'm someone to learn from. Sometimes you get to a point yourself because you recognize, oh, I have more experience in this thing than most people. So for me, I do a lot of identity work with my clients where we go into, especially through the personality lens, right? It's like, so introversion is one piece of the puzzle, introversion, extroversion. There are so many other aspects of how we show up, why we show up that way. And when it comes to networking for introverts in particular, that talk paired, and this is almost like a formula, right? So that paired something that a lot of people think is valuable. And according to my research, 92% of people believe that networking is a valuable skill. So it's not contested. No one, very few people, I guess 8 people in that room of 100 are like, no thanks. But
not for me.
exactly. But, even if you don't like doing it, you think it's valuable. And then when we look at demographics that more stereotypically are like, ooh, not for me, like, but they still think it's valuable, that would be introverts. So that's how that came about. And public speaking is also widely cited as the number one fear that people have in general. So now that I'm focusing more on assisting with public speaking, that is sort of another topic where, okay, people think it's valuable, but it's also elevated, right? Because not everyone, I think an entry point is, okay, get your networking skills on point. You don't need to be a leader at the moment. You just got to get in the room. But when you are speaking and all eyes are on you, it is absolutely a leadership opportunity.
Okay, yeah, that's a great way to think about it. How can we embody that?
Embodying leadership, well, the framework that I mentioned, the 4-step connects with confidence framework, you can self assess, okay, how calm am I feeling? Even in any given moment, you can walk through it. It doesn't need to be right before you step on a stage. In fact, it shouldn't be because there's a level of preparation that comes before that. But if you find yourself going through your day and you forget to breathe, that's one where all of a sudden you're like
Mm,
catching your
okay,
breath. You're like, oh shoot, I kind of forgot. But some people metabolize
yeah.
stress in that way. Other people, it's very shallow breathing. So, one of the techniques that I advocate for is box breathing. So, that's when you take a deep breath in for 4 counts, like literally fill up your belly and lungs. Your belly should be like huge, just like fill it all up. And then you pause for 4 counts. And then you exhale, and it's like wringing out your belly and lungs for 4 counts. And when you do that, even 3 times, I typically do this live in my workshop. People who were stressed report, oh, I am not stressed anymore. There is a very tangible shift in the room after just 3 deep
Yeah,
breaths. And these
yeah,
things can be so basic that we overlook them.
yeah, yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. I think that's a great way. Yeah, for me, it's always like fast breathing or shallow
Mm,
or
yeah.
yeah. And I always have to remind myself that too of get grounded before
Yeah.
because you never want to show up in not your best way.
Well, and then something else. So, if we're going to go through the framework again, so if we take a look at confidence, so actually, I'll tie in some ancient wisdom from Kabbalah. Uh, there's this adage that goes that you should not leave your house if you are in a state of wanting something from people. So, if you're about to leave your apartment, your house, wherever you're living, and you're like, okay, I'm going out to get clients, I'm going out to get friends, I'm going out to like get whatever I'm going to get from this date or like whatever, that's a repulsive energy. And it's not a
Mm,
confident energy. The confident energy is one, it can be strategic, right? It can be opening opportunity, making things more likely, but it's also this sense of trust of like, oh, okay, like I'm not in a state of really wanting or needing these external things. It's like, am I feeling good? Am I feeling resourced? Am I feeling like I have something to share, even if it's just my presence and I'm in a positive energy? And even if I sat next to someone and said nothing, they
yeah.
could actually feel more at ease because of that, because we are also interconnected, then that's the
Yeah.
value that I provide. So that's where confidence comes from, where it's not about performing, it's about like, are am I leaving my house knowing that I'm in either a giving or a being energy. And a being energy, I think, is the most powerful because sometimes we can overgive or overfunction as compensation for lower self-esteem or lower self-confidence. So it's like, can you be with yourself and know that you're enough?
It's a big question. It's a
Right.
big question for sure.
And I mean, it's something worth journaling on. And, so we're kind of building our way up here again in terms of self assessment. So
Yeah.
we've gone through calm, confidence. And then let's say that you're like, okay, like I meditated for 10 minutes. I'm feeling more calm. I'm feeling resourced. I know my value. Okay, let's go. Let's leave and go to this dinner or whatever. Then connection. You're able to be genuinely curious about other people. And there's this concept in my book called conversational sponges. And they're kind of what they sound like. It's conversational sponges are open-ended. They're not yes or no questions. They're not like, "Oh, do you like this?" where they get to be like, "Yes, no." It's more like, "Oh, what brought you here?" Or, "What did you find most interesting about the talk that they just gave?" Or, whatever. And it helps to be genuinely interested and it's not always about having these interesting stories to tell. It's having a genuine interest. And I know what's worked best for me is not necessarily leading with, oh, hi, like my name's Stephanie Thoma and here are my accolades. How about you? Like that that isn't always the
Yeah.
most connecting because then
Right.
there can be this subconscious like comparison of credentials. And then,
Mm,
it if you're really wanting to connect, my favorite connection events are ones where you're drawn to someone without even knowing, what the title is or anything. And then you're able to have a genuine conversation as people. And then let's say you connect on LinkedIn, you're like, oh, cool, that's what they're up to.
yeah.
And it just really allows for a genuine connection to form. And
Yeah.
then, yeah, so we went over connection. Then when it comes to impact, the people that you meet from that place, as I said earlier, you're able to have podcast interviews, you're able to craft books, and maybe in one of your books you want to interview an expert to get sound bites from them. And you're like, oh, I know this person. So it's this sort of cyclical framework that feeds into each other. But it's important to self-assess, wait, is there one area where
Mm,
I'm a little shaky? And certainly if it's below impact, then you can be sure that you will make a larger impact once you alleviate what is lower down in the pyramid.
totally. Totally. Yeah. I love the pyramid approach because like you just said, sometimes if we're like, why are we not showing up toward the best of our ability, or why every time I go networking do I break out into like a full body sweat, right? It's probably something further down that pyramid. So I love that you're helping people and your clients, and your book is helping with that. Like, just the impact you're having is huge. I love it.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, Stephanie, is there anything else you want to talk about before we get into my last question for you?
I'm open to your next question.
Okay, let's do it. So, as you know, there's so many podcasts, so many courses, so many books, so many downloads that we can do that nothing happens unless we take action, right? That's the most important thing. So, what are the action steps that you're going to challenge the audience with this week to actually make progress based on this conversation?
Number one is before you leave your front door, before you're going to something with other people, whether you know them or not, I'd like you to do box breathing, 3 deep breaths, and center into the intention that you are self resourced. And number two, I'd like you to do a self assessment when it comes to the Connect with Confidence framework. Are you feeling some stickiness around calm, confidence, connection, or impact, or maybe multiple?
Mhm.
And the third is I'd like you to root into, okay, if I were to be known for one thing, what could that be?
Yeah. Okay, that's super actionable. I love it. I love it. So I can't wait for the audience to do that. I will put the links to your website, your Instagram, and your book in the show notes. Is there anywhere else that people should come and connect with you?
Yeah, go ahead and look at stephaniethoma.com. That's Thoma. And you can check out the resources tab. You can check out the coaching tab. You can check out the about tab to learn a little bit more about, backstory and everything. And I am the most active on LinkedIn of all the social
Okay.
medias.
Okay, perfect. Cool. Well, I'll put those in the show notes. Thank you so much, Stephanie.
Yes, thank you, Haley.
Thank you for listening to the Employee to Boss podcast. If you made it to the end of this episode, I hope that you implement the actionable steps from this week's experts so you can get started with your business today. Please rate, review, and subscribe to the Employee to Boss podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. It helps more than you could ever imagine. Remember, a little progress each day leads to big results. We come out with a new episode every Tuesday. To access our show notes, transcripts, and courses, please check out espressopodcastproduction.com.